And we're going to pick up where we left off quite some time back with Macbeth Act III, Scene 1. And in the previous lesson, we had discussed the murder of the king and how that event fell into our themes of the artificial and the natural and the mechanism of cause and effect. So if the previous act was about the murder of the king, this one is about what I like to call the cover-up of that murder, where Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are trying to tie up the loose ends to secure their victory. It starts here with a character, hopefully you remember, named Banquo, and this is a friend of Macbeth's, and Banquo is thinking about the weird women and what they have promised. Because the promise they had made was twofold. First, it was to Macbeth that he will be the king, and then to Banquo, as Banquo says right here, that for Banquo, he himself should be the root and father of many kings. Well, if Macbeth is the king and Banquo is supposed to be the father of many kings, there's some sort of conflict here. So Lady Macbeth and Macbeth are going to have a party, a great feast, Lady Macbeth calls it right here, and their chief guest will be Banquo. But the lines right here from Lady Macbeth are quite telling. She refers to the great feast, but this feast has a double meaning. It's not only the actual physical, concrete party, the solemn supper. It's more than that. It is the fruits of their labors. And if Banquo is forgotten, if he does not make it to the party, if there's a gap in that great feast, that great victory, it will be all thing unbecoming, meaning the whole thing will fall apart. So Macbeth and Lady Macbeth need to, fill in this gap, you might say. Macbeth asks Banquo, are you riding? And at first, for me, I thought, Macbeth doesn't want him to leave because he wants to stay so that they can poison him. That's what I thought. Is it far you ride? We don't miss our feast, right? So I felt, they want him to come to the dinner, but it turns out that's not the case. What is the case is that Macbeth has hired some murderers to kill Banquo out on the road. I want to look more closely down at this line right here. So I think this is a nice quotation that we can discuss, and it falls within our theme. So the theme, if you remember, was about one theme was cause and effect. Well, if you see time right here, time, what is time? Time is cause and effect. And then what is Macbeth saying? Well, we should be master of our time. Now, if time has cause and effect, it means it has events and the repercussions of those events, what can I be master of, right? Let every man be master of the event, the action, and its effects. Well, you can't control the effects of your actions. So very interesting line here about what is my role, what is my agency within the mechanism of cause and effect, which we've been discussing throughout these lessons. So here's a great line actually. To be thus is nothing, but to be safely thus. Okay, what is it saying though? To be thus is nothing. Well, to be, let's say, successful is nothing unless you are safely successful, right? Unless you are safely thus. Great little line, applies to many different things, right? So here we find out that Macbeth has hired some murderers. They're called murderers, right there. And Macbeth has apparently talked to them before, and he's letting them know that the things that have happened to you in the past were not mine, not my fault. I'm innocent. It's Banquo who held you so under fortune. And then Macbeth is wanting to make sure that they are confirmed that they're going to kill Banquo. And his persuasion here. Is patience going to keep you from fulfilling your task? Is it something in your nature? Have you been gospeled, have moral values, to pray for this man? Because he's had a heavy hand on you. And I thought these things in here, if you think about what we said before, right? There's time, space, and then the aspects within action, right? There's human action, but then there's human influence, human emotion, etc., right? Well, here are some of the influences on our actions, right? Maybe your internal characteristics, your personality, right? Then here, of course, gospel. Well, this is your ethical teaching, your indoctrination. your religious beliefs, whatever it might be, right? And then there's also the heavy hands, right, that influence our actions. Those who are in power, those who are in authority, and you can enumerate those, think about those for yourself. This is something that's repeated. We've seen this earlier in the play too, but here the first murderer is saying, "We are men." Of course, raises a big question, you know. So I've been talking about what, when we say we are men, we're saying we hold some universal quality of manhood. And I'm trying to discuss the universal quality of man, woman's, you know, a place within the mechanism of cause and effect. So here, Macbeth goes on for a catalog, and he has a little analogy here, an analogy between dogs and then between people. And there are different types of dogs, as he says here. You know, there's hounds and greyhounds, mongrels, etc. There's different kinds of dogs, and they have different values. And the humans, there's also different kinds of humans as far as their societal role or whatever we want to add to that. And part of it is our bounteous nature, what we're born with, right? The qualities of our birth. For us today, we can think about socioeconomic qualities, we can think about biological qualities, the things that you were born with or into, and then the additions upon that, perhaps your education, your upbringing, right? It's the same as dogs as it is of men, right? And based upon those two things, essentially it's something like nature, nurture, right? But that has some effect on your station and your rank in manhood. Great stuff in there that ties into that theme, right? Of when I talk about cause and effect, the mechanism of cause and effect, I'm talking about, you know, simple things like free will, agency, can you make your own decisions? We just take these simpler ideas and put on a little more complicated language to, you know, round them out and make them more involved in the current discourse of how people talk today in academics. So the second murderer is, yes, I will do it, right? I'll do it. And the first, I'll do it too. And then they say why they will do it. And look, whom the vile blows and buffets of the world hath so incensed that I am reckless what I do to spite the world. And this guy, weary with disasters, tugged with fortune. In other words, the external situation, experience of life has impacted their internal decision to do this, cause and effect. It must be done tonight. This is the death. I require a clearness, no rubs nor botches in the work. In which work? Their work, right, to complete this task, this assassination, but also that will give me my own clearness in the rubs and botches in my own work. And it goes back to that idea, right? To be safely thus, to be safely thus. This was said previously too, and I just thought, you know, it's a little cause and effect, you know, does he go to heaven, does he go to hell? The unknown effect. We've seen this idea in the previous lesson, I think. Down here, you know, on the theme, I'm just kind of translating a lot of these lines for you. Nothing's had, all spent, where our desires got without content. 'Tis safer to be that which we destroy than by destruction dwell in doubtful joy. Nice little rhyming couplets here, very nice. But you know, it's nothing if we don't have content, if we're not safely thus. It's the same idea, and it would have been safer safer to be that which we destroy. It'd be better to be dead, right? Better to be dead than have a doubtful joy. But it's the same idea, to be safely thus. So Lady Macbeth here, though, she, you know, Macbeth is off stage. He doesn't see that point we just saw, but she's wanting to get safety too, right? She's a little worried. But she says this, what's done is done. She takes on this very strong stance in the face of Macbeth, I suppose, to not show weakness to him for some reason. But we have the reference to a snake. And the snake is used a couple of times in here. Later, it's going to be that Banquo is the snake that's been killed, right? But his son escapes, and he's the worm. Okay, so keep that in mind, the snake. We're going to also see a bat, a worm, a beetle, just these references to animals, if we want to do that animal symbolism idea. Okay, Squirt's the snake, not killed it. That's going to come up in just a moment. I thought this was interesting, though, here was both worlds suffer. And which world is he talking about? Well, we eat our meal in fear. Isn't that the physical world impacted by the emotional world, right? The torture of the mind. The way I kind of looked at this was the first one was body and mind, and then I have external, internal, and I can play with that idea again. Lady Macbeth says something she said to him before is take control of your appearance, right? We've seen the same theme. This is just more evidence. Take control, be artificial, but be in control. Same idea here. Make our faces visitors to our hearts. We disguise our emotions. And here are those the creatures I pointed out. The scorpion, the bat, the beetle in here. I was trying to think about what we might say about those, but at first I thought, well, they're all closer to the earth. There's sort of this return to the earth, sort of a Tocthanus, like weird sisters, natural, supernatural. But then I thought bats, they actually fly. I'm not sure, but they're all dark, scary creatures, and they just add to that sort of ominous, foreboding atmosphere. I like this double meaning here. We have a dreadful note over the rung night's yawning peal. So a bell, the nighttime bell, the midnight bell rings, and it strikes a dreadful note. Well, the note there is this. It's the written form, right, of note taking and whatnot within the play, and then of course the note of the sound. And we see Shakespeare do this quite a lot. He likes to make you aware subtly that this is a play, right? And then I just marked these from Macbeth. The ceiling, the nighttime, it hides us from the day, and at night we can carry out these deeds like murders and whatnot. And I think it's supposed to add to that ominous atmosphere. It's a little frightening, right? And it ties to that idea we've seen before about the artificial and the natural, and disguise and reality, and what does night cover up. Okay, so this is the scene of the assassination of Banquo. And again, you see the light and the darkness, but there's that call for a light, and the light here is about knowledge, awareness. But something sort of interesting happens with the light here is they have the torch, and then the second murderer, notice the second murderer calls for a light, but then the first murderer strikes out the light, and they attack Banquo. He dies. You can see right there, Banquo dies, but his son escapes. And then the third murderer says, who struck the light? Were we not supposed to do it that way? Well, one got away. I thought this was a nice little touch because it adds, it furthers the plot, right? It allows the plot to continue to digress toward its finale with the escape of Fleance. But also it's realistic, right? I mean, it has that note of realism that something could go wrong in a nighttime assassination. The light struck out. So I like that hint of realism, that note of realism. This goes to the idea of the hierarchy we saw earlier with the dogs and the rank and station of people. So here they are at their tables. And this is the scene where they're going to find out about the death of Banquo, and then Banquo's ghost is going to come. So again, the more supernatural elements, which for this audience I think would be, again, frightening. This is a horror movie, essentially, right? So Macbeth says to a murderer, there's blood on your face. It's Banquo's blood. Well, it's better thee without than he within. Very dark, right? Better his blood on the outside than yours, right? His throat is cut. Thou art the best of the cutthroats. Strange line there. But they inform him that Fleance has escaped, and what happens? Then comes my fit again, which he's about to have sort of a psychological breakdown, a nervous breakdown. Everything would have been perfect if you had killed Fleance too. And again, I'm talking about that, the master of your time. The master of your time. He masters his actions. He hired murderers. He took that action, but he can't control the outcomes. And here we see the outcomes that were unexpected and negative. Cabined, cribbed, confined. These are negative outcomes for him. Bound into saucy doubts and fears, right? But Banquo is dead. So this is where we get that snake. So the grown serpent, Banquo, is dead, but the worm that's fled, that's Fleance, his son. That worm that's gotten away, who will grow into a snake, will grow venom. He has no teeth now, but he'll have teeth in the future. So, the dangers of the son seeking revenge. And here's where the ghost of Banquo comes in, and Macbeth is hallucinating this. He's hallucinating the ghost of Banquo. Of course, there are no ghosts, right, in the real world. So this is supernatural. So Macbeth looks at the table, and there's no seat for him. They say, there is a seat for you. He's like, where? And he's freaking out. He thinks he sees the ghost there. Okay, this is just that's what this scene is. But we do have ideas that tie to previous parts. So remember earlier when I think it was previous lesson when Macbeth was holding the dagger and like, is this dagger in my hand? And it was fantasy, reality. We discussed that. Well, here it is again, right? The very painting of your fear, the air-drawn dagger. But when all's done, you look but on a stool. And we talked about, I mentioned this before, right? If you agree with me, was ultimately, despite our perspective, despite our imagination, our free will, there is a physical reality that ultimately wins. If we have the mind-body problem, mind-body dualism, it depends on your what you think about it, but I would say that ultimately the body wins. The demands of the body win, whether the demands of hunger, thirst, sleep, warmth, the demands of senescence and aging. In the end, there's physical reality. So the very painting of your fear, your imagination, your hopes and your dreams, when all's done, you look but on a stool. So Macbeth sees this ghost, and this is like a kind of a, look at this zombie. This is like a, the Renaissance zombie. The time has been that when the brains were out, the man would die, and there's an end. But now they rise again. Wow, great opening quotation for a zombie movie, right? Because Banquo, he sees the ghost of Banquo. He thinks that Banquo has come back, right? So then the ghost leaves, right? And Macbeth, imagine how you would stage this. The ghost is behind Macbeth, and he doesn't see it. He's like, our dear friend Banquo, whom we miss. And then he sees the ghost and, quit my sight, bones are marrowless, blood is cold, no speculation in those eyes. So how would this be staged? How would a contemporary, filmmaker stage this scene? What does Banquo look like? It sounds very zombie-like, right? Even though he's how many hours dead, right? So Macbeth is, again, with this idea of man. And whatever a man dares to do, I'll dare to do it. I'll fight bears, I'll fight a rhinoceros, I'll fight the tiger, all these natural things, as long as it is any shape but that. And what shape is that? Well, this shape, right? The shape of a zombie. So supernatural, natural. And let's put this in context a little bit here. Let's take the words supernatural and natural and just change them over. Let's change natural. It's actually here, like a bear, a tiger, a rhinoceros. Those could be like the actual, right? But who knows what is to be, right? Who knows, a million years of evolution or, AI technology, what is possible to be. So there we have the actual, what actual is, bear, tiger, rhinoceros. And then the virtual, what is possible to be. Bones are marrowless, blood is cold, some post-biological society. Nonetheless, there's a point of the concrete reality and then the possibilities of imagination. He returns to himself, and when you ask this question, if you wanted to write something about that, according to Macbeth, according to Shakespeare's Macbeth, what is a man? Interesting question of how the play portrays that. And from a new historical perspective, we look at how the qualities of manhood as suggested in Shakespeare's Macbeth, how they communicate with qualities of manhood as we see them today. Interesting conversation, I think. When he returns to who he is as a man here, though, I think it's a return to reason, return to rationality. I think. Can such things be? Can imagination be so powerful and overcome us like a summer's cloud without our special wonder? So whether it's imagination or emotions or whatever these things he's talking about are, superstitions perhaps, shouldn't we be amazed? Shouldn't we have a special wonder over their power? I thought this right here read as sort of a supernatural, superstitious idea. It reminded me of karma, what goes around comes around idea. It will have blood, they say, blood will have blood, right? Stones have been known to move and trees to speak. So the first one there, look at these two ideas, right? Blood will have blood. That's a relationship between cause and effect. Blood, cause, will have blood, effect. There will be revenge, for example. But we've already talked about this. We don't know what the effect will be. It is unknown. So the belief that you know what is to come. Stones have been known to move and trees to speak. That's supernatural, right? There's a lesson here, I think. It's a lesson in physics about cause and effect, right? And it's a philosophical lesson too. Limitations of agency. What is the night, he asks. Almost at odds with morning. In other words, it's late. Concretely, she's saying it's late. But which is which? Isn't that a fantastic line? Because within the context of what we were just talking about, they're in this liminal space, the threshold between day and night. Of, you know, when it's 3 in the morning, is it 3 in the morning or 3 at night? That space in between where all seems possible, the virtual, right? Between the moment of cause and effect is the virtual. Okay, so Macbeth basically says here that he's in too deep. All causes shall give way. Doesn't seem to matter what I do. Doesn't seem to matter what I do. Right? All causes shall give way. I am in blood stepped in so far that should I wade no more, returning were as tedious as go over. I can't seem to pull back the tide. I made an action, made a choice, and it has this flood of consequences, and the consequences in his case are bloody ones. Okay, I skipped down here. So we have Lennox, and here's part of the cover-up. Part of the cover-up was the killing of Banquo, which messed up because Fleance got away. But look at this part of the cover-up as given to us through the voice of Lennox. Duncan the king is dead. Banquo was out too late. He's dead. And if it please you, Fleance killed his father, for Fleance fled. See that? That's a framing. Someone's been framed for murder, but not through Macbeth's even. Macbeth didn't mean to frame him for murder, but it worked out. And then these were Duncan's sons, but they fled, so they killed their father again. Macbeth is free, right? No one suspects him. And look at the positives. Macbeth, when he killed the two servants, right, who were in the room, Macbeth killed them. Oh, was it not nobly done? Wasn't it wise? Look at these positive adjectives tied to Macbeth. He has borne all things well. Talk about a cover-up, right? This is just a little bit of the sort of the geopolitical, what's happening. There might be wars. You know, there's been the death of a king, right? That's not central to my reading, but you can take a look at it. You know, what were the geopolitical consequences of this? And yeah, that's the end right there. And we'll pick up with Act 4. So if you watched all the way through the video, you might notice I haven't done a video in a while. Well, I'm trying to get back to it now and do the best I can. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. If you do like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and I'm going to try to be a lot more regular doing these videos now. All right, thanks.